Okay, it's time to start one of the most interesting units, which is relationships and communication that occurs within relationships. You just finished watching the two videos that show the way men and women communicate are very different, and especially when we're forming interpersonal relationships, that communication can be even more complex. This unit is all about romantic relationships, so it has nothing to do with like friendships or other types of relationships. It's all about how do you communicate best when in a romantic relationship. And that's what we're going to spend most of our time talking about. So, the first thing we have to talk about is why, as human beings, we form relationships to begin with. What is it about us that we want to be in a relationship? And what what interpersonal needs drive our desire to be in relationships? And the first thing is appearance. So, attraction is a real thing. We don't really need to spend a lot of time talking about attraction, but however, one important thing to note is that attraction and appearance only last for so long in terms of driving us to be in a relationship. So it becomes less important as the relationship develops. We begin to admire and be attracted to things that aren't physical with people as we form closer relationships with them. So in the early stages, attraction is great and important, and it draws us to each other, but it's just one part of many other reasons why we form relationships. The other reason we form relationships is we look for people who are similar to us. So subconsciously, we're looking for some ego support. We want to validate what we like and validate what we are. So we're often driven to people that are complementary or similar to us in many ways. They say that there are three areas in which it's better for interpersonal relationships for you to be similar: political views, religion, and career goals. And you can see in those important areas how if you're not very similar in those, it could cause some tension and unneeded conflict in the relationship. Doesn't mean that it has to be that way, but it definitely helps the relationship progress and be less contentious, right? Unless you can make some agreements. I mean, think about like religion, how difficult that would be, or even career goals. If you are trying to, rise in your career and somebody isn't supportive of that, that's going to cause some problems as well. They've also found that things that we're attracted to, if they're exaggerated in somebody, we won't be attracted to that person. So if we like people that are funny or humorous, but they're over the top and cracking jokes all the time and never appropriate, and just over the top, then that becomes unattractive in our eyes. So that's something to really think about in yourself. If you're wondering how you can become more attractive to others, you take a look at the personality traits that you have, and are there any that are a little bit overdone or a little bit too much? And is that maybe pushing people away from you? And that could be part of the reason why you're not attractive to others, right? This is things we sometimes reflect about in ourselves. Um, I mentioned this before, but we often are drawn to people that complement us. So, for example, sometimes introverts are drawn to be in relationships with extroverts because it's kind of a complementary trait. Um, or things that maybe pair well with our traits seem to be attractive to us as well. We also like people who seem to like us. So if you find out that somebody is interested in you, you look at them differently, and then you often think that they're more attractive than you did before. So there's some reciprocal attraction happening there. We're also attracted to competent people. So we hope that their skills and abilities will rub off on us. We want to be around them all the time. And that seems to draw people to others. So if you want to gain the liking of others, right, there's a lot of things you can do. It's be good at what you do, be proud of what you do, but be humble, and that will tend to attract people. You'll seem competent but not arrogant, and that's ways that people could maybe be attracted to you. We also form relationships because we have the need to self-disclose. And this is the idea that we want someone to know us and we want someone to understand and get us. And self-disclosure, that kind of vulnerability that comes with self-disclosure, is the way that we can do that. When people share private information with you, it implies a relationship, right? There's a relationship of respect and trust. And we have an interpersonal need to do that. We're looking to matter to somebody, and for our lives to matter to somebody else. And so that need to self-disclose is important. There's some warnings that come with self-disclosure. We have to be really careful that we don't over self-disclose too early in the relationship, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. You have to follow reciprocity, which means that when you're out on a date or when you're forming a relationship, you share equally, right? He tells a story about your childhood, you tell a story about his childhood. She reveals something that embarrasses her, you reveal something that embarrasses her, right? Like you match and reciprocate the self-disclosure. You've all been around somebody who just tells everything or self-discloses too much, and that becomes awkward or uncomfortable. So we have to be careful about that. Although changing, we often form relationships with people around us, proximity. Although, with internet and technology and dating apps and the world that's even more connected, that's not as true as it used to be. People have long-term relationships with people they've never met, right? It's the whole premise of the show Catfish, right? That you don't really know who you're talking to, and can have a relationship with somebody through text message or through video chat, right? And so things are changing, but for the most part, healthy, good, long-term relationships often need an element of proximity. And then finally, one of the most important concepts, and this is such a great concept for you later in your life or even right now, when you're trying to decide if you should be with someone long term or if you should end the relationship, right, or stay in a relationship, you have to think about the rewards. And there's a theory called the social exchange theory, and I really love this reward or this theory for romantic relationships, but also for other relationships in your life. And it's all about cost and rewards. So you're looking for someone, and this is as you think about the rest of your life and who you're going to spend it with, you're looking for someone who the rewards of being with them is greater or equal to the costs in being with them. And you have to decide, are the costs tangible or intangible? I mean, think of a tangible cost. Being in a relationship costs money, right? You're spending money on this person, you're taking them out to dinner, right? But are the rewards, and you define the rewards, right? The companionship, the being in a team together, right? The mattering to somebody else, those are all sort of intangible rewards. Are those worth the cost, right? So as you think about, or as you get into relationships in the future and you're trying to decide, do I spend the rest of my life with this person? You really have to think about, what reward am I getting and what does it cost to be with them? And if it's too great a cost, then it's not going to work out and you're going to always feel unsettled, and that things aren't equally distributed. So I love that sort of logical way of looking at relationships. Think about friendships that you have. What are the costs greater than the rewards, or the rewards greater than the costs? And it's kind of a really formulaic way to look logically at relationships and help you evaluate whether they're still worth your time or whether you need to end the relationship. So just store that for the future in a couple years, when you're making some big decisions about your life and the people you're with, and remember that one for the future because I think it can be really helpful. Okay, there was a communication researcher in the 90s who developed a relationship cycle, and he believed that all relationships, particularly romantic relationships, go through a cycle, and stages. And the stages are divided into 3 sections: coming together, maintaining, and coming apart. And we're going to go through all of these stages, and talk about how relationships look in all of these stages, and sometimes some of the stages can be repeated and some of the stages cannot be repeated. And we'll talk about those as we go through them. Okay, so the first one is the quickest. It's the coming together, and it's basically initiation. I've included some ridiculously terrible pickup lines here, but the reason we have pickup lines is because of the coming together stage. You need some sort of way to initiate conversation. You see someone you're attracted to, you know somebody that you want to go on a date with. You have to initiate, right? You have to indicate that you're interested in a relationship. So as much as we hate pickup lines, that's what they were made for, right? Is this idea that we need a way to initiate the relationship. It's fast, it's quick. Once it's initiated, you can't go back. You can't unknow somebody. You can't unmeet somebody. And that's why a lot of people talk about the importance of a first impression, right? There's nothing you can do once you've initiated with somebody. That stage can never be repeated. That's an important note to note with initiation, is that it can never be repeated. So quickly, you'll move from initiation to experimenting. And experimenting is where you're sort of testing out and auditioning this person and trying to figure out if this is a person you want to form a relationship with. The biggest note to make with experimenting is that it includes small talk. And most of us hate small talk. It's awkward. It's usually fairly boring, but according to the researcher Mark Knapp, the communication researcher that came up with the cycles of relationships, he says that it's essential to building the sense of community, to feel included. I like small talk because it's this sort of audition where you're trying to audition people and see if their likes are things that you like or can live with, or if their personality and behaviors are things that you can live with. And it's really just sort of this really basic and important part of forming a relationship. It's safe, and really one really important dating note to remember is that during this small talk and experimenting phase, people are usually trying to display their best features because just like in an audition, you're trying to be your best. So if you think about things that bother you or you're concerned about here in the experimenting stage, when people are being their best, those are going to get exaggerated and even more of a problem later. So you have to kind of weigh the fact that this is their best self, right? They're putting on their best self, and is this something that you're comfortable with? And I kind of like that idea. It reduces uncertainties without commitment. It can be just something to do. I really like it as a way to uncover topics for future conversations. So then you go on a date with this person you had some small talk with, and you're like, hey, you mentioned that you like to kayak. Where are places that you like to go? What kind of plans do you have for kayaking in the future, right? It allows you then to have sort of this foundation to talk about later. And it's really critical to developing relationships. You have to engage in the small talk. Here's some good small talk tips. I think if you can become really good at small talking, then that really helps move along the stages of the relationship. You have to make sure that you are in a place where small talk can happen, not crowded, not loud, right? You have to watch their nonverbal cues. If you're at like a party or a group activity and their arms are folded and they're looking around and they're not really giving you a lot of information, they don't want to talk to you, right? So give them an excuse to leave and go find somebody else to talk to. Don't reveal all your inner thoughts and your inner ideas, right? Keep sort of that self-censoring going as you're having these conversations. Don't be inappropriate, right? No detail rundown of your life. Keep it brief and really quickly anecdotal, right? You don't need to give the deep history of all your problems and concerns and things that have happened to you. And really, I think the best thing you can do is learn how to be a good question asker. I have a brother who is incredibly shy, but he really wanted to, he knew he wanted to be in a business where he would have to talk to contractors and to workers and to people. He also wanted to date and get married. And so he really worked hard at being a good question asker. And it drove us crazy for a while because it was like question after question after question. But it really helped him overcome his shyness and helped him work through some of the things, the sort of shy behavior and helped him become more outgoing. So being a good question asker can help you with small talk. Maintain eye contact and pay attention. Remember that reciprocation. Reveal a little at a time as they do, and try to find things in common. And just be careful. If you reveal too much, you'll seem untrustworthy and weird. And if you're trying to form a relationship, that's not going to go well. If you want, in the module, I uploaded a Jimmy Fallon hashtag awkward dates. So you can see that really everybody struggles with initiation and experimenting. It's just an awkward phase that we all have to go through, and know that once you get through it, the relationship gets better. But those are pretty funny. So if you want to pause the video right now, and go to the hashtag awkward dates and watch those, you can, and then come back to the video or to the lecture. Okay, so if you make it through experimenting, you move into the intensifying stage. And this is the stage where you drive everybody crazy, right? You're really, really affectionate. You express feelings. You start to become, a couple. You do favors for each other. It's a really happy time. A lot of people call it the bubble. That's what they'll call it sometimes. And it's sort of like the love bubble, right? You're in this like really intense emotional place. You're getting to know each other's families. You're doing all these things that feel intense, right? Lots of intense feelings. And a lot of people fall in love with being in this stage. They get to the normal stage of relationships and they miss this stage, so they'll break up with the person they're with and start all over again just to sort of live in this place. And while that's a fun place to be, it's not sustainable and it's not real. It's not real life and everyday life. So you have to kind of enjoy it and know that things will normalize a little bit, but the intensifying stage just doesn't last very long. And like I said, you end up driving everybody around you crazy with your PDA and your baby talk and all your silly, love stuff that everybody can't stand. So that's the intensifying stage. Okay, then you move into maintaining. So in maintaining, we want to do a couple of things. So once we get out of the intensifying stage, you're in a relationship, and the relationship is the everyday, and you're trying to, a relationship is sort of like a car. You have to maintain it and keep the oil changed and regular checkups and check the air in the tire and keep it full of gas. So you're just keeping the relationship going. You need to stay positive, making sure that you're upbeat and the climate is polite. You need to be open and communicate. And most people in relationships need assurances. Assurances are verbal and nonverbal clues that someone matters to you and that you're committed to the relationship. Whether that's I love you, whether that's presence, whether that's touching them in a certain way, right? All of those things are assurances. There are some researchers, and we'll actually have you take this quiz next time, but there are some researchers who believe that everybody has a love language, a way that they feel assurances in a relationship and a way that they give assurances. There are 5. Some people like to be told, I enjoy being in a relationship with you, I love you, right? Those words of affirmation. Some people like presents. When someone buys them a gift, it's an assurance that the relationship is going well. Some people like physical touch. Some people want quality time, and some people want service, acts of service. So we'll spend some time next time to test what your love language is. But you can also, when you're in a relationship, you can just sort of experiment with the other person and see what they respond to best. So if you give someone a gift and they don't seem to really respond positive. It's a gift, so they'll be positive, but they're not really feeling like that validated anything. But then you spend time with them and they seem to really respond well to that, then you know that maybe they're more driven by quality time than gifts. Most people's, for the most part, are touch and quality time. But for some, the other 3 are really, really important. And so you got to kind of figure that out when you're in a relationship. You got to figure out how the other person needs that assurance that the relationship is still good and that you matter, or that they matter to you. So we often make sure that we have separate and similar social networks in maintenance. So you don't have to be with that person all the time. You can have a girls' night or go hang out with a friend, right? And it's sometimes really good to have those breaks away from their relationship. In maintaining, you begin to share your tasks, right? You start to become a team and help each other out with life's obligations. And that is all what maintaining looks like. There are two stages in maintenance: integrating, so you start to bring your life together. People become we, right? Or they'll say things like, I have to check with so and so because their lives are integrated. Your sense of obligation grows towards that person. If it goes really well, often you'll make some sort of public announcement of bonding. So whether that's changing, your social media status or getting engaged or married, right? You're making this sort of public commitment. That all happens in the maintenance stage. And just remember that men and women are different in terms of communication. So as you integrate in your life and bond, you have to remember that that's going to look different for men and women, right? How they decide to do that and what that looks like. Okay, so all relationships will slip into the differentiating stage. And this is where things start to happen that pull the relationship a little bit apart. They're just differences, right? Sometimes they come from outside forces. So work gets really busy and you don't see your significant other, and that starts to cause problems, finances, or other relationships, right? There are things that start to kind of give your relationship some turbulence a little bit. And you have to decide in the differentiating stage, are you going to work through it and can go back into maintaining, or are you going to slide into circumscribing and into falling apart, into the breaking up stage? Differentiating is a part of maintaining because all all relationships have conflict. It's going to happen. You're going to have disagreements and differences, but it's all about how you resolve it. Sometimes in relationships, there will be relational transgressions. So things that happen in the relationship that cause problems for each other, like an unfaithfulness, distance, jealousy, even verbal hostility, so aggression, right? Some of these are more serious than others, but that's where this is going to come up. After you've been maintaining for a while, or even not for a while, you'll start to see some of these differences arise. So you then move into the circumscribing stage and you have two choices. You either fix the problem, right, which takes time and effort depending on how severe, or you ignore it. And if you ignore it, you're going to keep sliding down that relationship cycle into breaking up, right? So you really have to decide if you want to fix it or not and know the consequences of either choice. So that moves us into the coming apart. If you decide not to fix it, and you'll experience this sometime in your life, you'll have to end or be on the end of a relationship that's ending, right? You'll be the one that's broken up with, or do the breaking up. And there's lots of different reasons for why that happens. It's really difficult because it's so emotional and our identities are connected to this other person. So it's really difficult not to take it personally and not to feel like you're a failure. But a really important thing to remember is that people don't fail, the relationship didn't, right? We work okay on our own. We just didn't work well together for whatever reason. And it's really hard not to internalize that relationship failure, and it's hard not to let it impact other relationships. But we really have to separate ourselves from the relationship that didn't work out. Obviously, we want to move on and learn from it and get better, but we just have to be really careful that we don't internalize too much of that failure and let it impact other relationships. This is such an interesting graph. Back when Facebook was at its peak, before Instagram and other social media, a London-based researcher wanted to see, what time of year were breakups most likely. And he scanned over 10,000 Facebook updates over a year-long period, and he plotted them on a graph, and he came up with this data result, which is so funny. You can see that breakups occur at peak times and in certain times of the year. In the weeks leading up to Valentine's Day, look at this one. Spring break is a high breakup time. Maybe people are wanting to not have attachments as they enjoy their spring break. This one I thought was just unnecessarily cruel. April Fool's Day. Maybe people didn't understand it was a joke, but that's kind of terrible. Mondays in the spring are particularly bad, and then it dips down for a while. Summer is about the same. Look, the safest time to be in a relationship is August, September, or October, and then it builds and builds and builds until the weeks before Christmas, which makes sense because there's a lot of family things involved with Christmas, and and people may not be ready to make that kind of commitment. At least we have some humanity, and on Christmas Day, there's not a lot of breaking up going on. So kind of a funny chart, but it kind of shows you the way relationships cycle, or at least in this small study, and when it's more likely to be broken up with according to society's input. So I thought that was kind of a fun chart. Obviously, here's what we talked about when the most breakups occur 3 times a year: spring break, summer holidays, and the week before Christmas, which kind of makes sense, I think, why. Okay, so how do you break up with somebody? You're going to have to do it, right? It's unavoidable. And it's not something you want to do over text. You owe the person you've been in a relationship with an in-person breakup. But it is hard and awkward and really not fun for everybody. But there are some tips to make breaking up a little bit easier. The first is, you got to find a good time and place to do it. You don't want to break up with someone in front of their family or in a really public place. You got to give them the opportunity to save face, so they don't want to be too embarrassed. So if other people are there, that might lose that face-saving opportunity. Lots and lots of eye language. The person you're breaking up with is already going to feel really helpless because you have all the power, right? You're ending the relationship. So if you're using a lot of you language and you're using a lot of, you or even we language, we do this, or I feel that we should break up, it takes more of their power away and makes them feel even more helpless. So the more I language you can use, the better. Be sensitive but clear, right? Direct and honest. Obviously, if it becomes abusive, you need to make sure that you have help there if that's why you're ending the relationship. But you really have to weigh the appropriate thing to say with total honesty. You don't want to say every single thing that's causing you to end the relationship, because that's going to really hurt some self-concept and self-esteem. But you also want to be appropriate so that they understand. Use the appropriate words. So you really have to weigh what is best there. Go back to the module, and there's another hashtag of how to not break up with somebody. Jimmy Fallon will outline a couple ways not to do it. So pause the video and go watch those and then come back. Okay, sorry, my neighbor's dog's barking in the background. So there's a lot of reasons why relationships end. Sometimes it's just a choice. Sometimes they atrophy. Sometimes you're separated. People can pass away. Most people tend to avoid when they want to break up with someone. They'll stop responding by text. Ghosting is the term that we use. And this is an unhealthy breakup technique, right? It's going to cause more problems in the end. Often people will engage in relational ruses. They'll manipulate or lie. I think of like the episode in Friends where Chandler is breaking up with Janice and tells her he's moving to Yemen, right? If you're a Friends fan, that's a lie. That's a relationship ruse. A pseudo de-escalation is where someone will say, let's just try being friends, or let's take a step back, right? When really you're just delaying the inevitable, and it's much easier to break up when you want to break up. Sometimes people will try and be a terrible person so that the other person will break up with them. And all of these are really poor breakup techniques, right? If you want to end a relationship, you need to be strong enough and adult enough to have a conversation and try and avoid some of these techniques that are a little bit more unhealthy. Here's a couple funny memes about breaking up and more hashtags that came from Jimmy Fallon. So I'll just flip through these and you can take a look at those. Here's another one. Oh, you guys, my neighbor's dogs. Seriously. Here's one more. One more. Okay. It's not you, it's the weather, right? Not a great breakup. So, before you end a relationship, there's a couple things you got to consider. Make sure that you want to end the relationship. Don't use empty threats hoping that they'll change because you're saying you want to break up. There's a really great phrase that says, don't kill it before you leave it. So don't make it so bad by your behavior and your actions that it's already kind of dead to begin with. and then try as much as you can to end on a note of the positive, whether it's a forgiveness or a discussion or an emphasis of how great they are, right? Something like that that ends in the note of a positive. You gotta make one swift cut, right? You gotta say the words, I don't want to be in a relationship anymore, or I would like to break up, right? Not break up with you. That makes that person feel a little bit of that powerless again. Just, I would like to break up. And communicate as much as you can the reasons why. Here's a clip from Friends. I put it in the module if you want to watch it. Ross and Rachel have been dating, or not dating, they're broken up, and they're doing the awkward returning of the stuff, and you can see that the breakup didn't go well, the relationship climate is not good, they're not good friends right now, but it just shows you some of the problems that can occur if you don't break up in a more mature way. You usually need to start with a warning intro, so give the person a signal that something is about to happen. We've all been kind of trained when someone says we need to talk, or there's something I need to talk to you about, that something is going to happen. So I've got something on my mind I'd like to talk over with you. How would you feel about sitting down and talking for a bit, right? Or can we talk? Something like that will really help and warn them that something is coming that they need to be aware of. Own the decision as your own, and try and give a couple of reasons, right? And try to avoid, again, the we shoulds, and say, I think, I have decided to, right? So that you're owning that. And then, avoiding that we is the mistake that, or using that we is a mistake that most people make when they're ending relationships. Give a couple reasons. I made this decision made because of this. When this happened, I felt this way. My concern is, right, here's an example. I've decided to end the relationship because I'm at an age, or I'm looking to find a permanent marriage partner, right? My concern is, as much as I like you, I see too many differences. So I've decided to move on. Lots of that I language, which will really help manage the communication. Okay, so that sort of ends our discussion of the relationship stages. You're now going to do an activity, and not as a group, you're actually going to do this individually, where I want you to look at music. Music really is a big part of relationships. It describes a lot of relationships. So what I want you to do is go back to the module handout, the document, and there's a chart there that has each of the stages. And with each of the stages, I want you to find a song, and it can be old or new, any genre of music, it just needs lyrics, that really typifies that stage of their relationship. So you're actually not going to share it as a class, you're going to submit it online for me to review, and you'll need to include a lyric. So you'll need to use the internet and lyric search sites as you find the songs, and include a lyric in your evaluation of how it fits the stage. So you're going to find a song, there's some more instructions on the document, and you're going to put the title and the artist, find a lyric, and an explanation of how it meets the criteria of that particular relationship cycle. And that will go on the document that you upload into the assignment. So this should take you the rest of the class period. You're welcome to plug your headphones into the computer and listen to the songs as you research them. But if you don't finish today, then you'll have a little bit of time next class period. Don't worry so much about getting it done. It's not due until then, but it should take you most of the class period today.